Greetings and salutations, everybody. My name is John Campea, Senior Editor of AMC Movie News, and today we've got another installment of AMC Asks. Now, AMC Asks is where we ask you guys a question, then we select one response at random and give out 2 free AMC movie passes. I'm going to tell you how you can do that in just a second. The topic of our conversation today: what do we think is going to be the best superhero movie of 2012? Now, joining me in this discussion today is AMC Associate Editor, Mr. George Roush. George, how you doing?
Good. How are you doing?
I'm doing fantastic, thanks. Now, George, there's a number of films right now on the horizon coming out in 2012 that are superhero films. We got 5 of them. We're going to run them down. We're going to talk a little bit about the pros and cons. Right. Let's start with this one. Let's start with... it's a remake, I guess you could say. Judge Dredd is being remade. Also, this time just being called Dredd, starring Carl Urban. What do you know about this one, and what are your thoughts on it right now?
With Carl Urban, who was always a big Judge Dredd fan, the film, I guess, is going through some post-production issues as far as editing and who's in control of the final cut of the movie. But that shouldn't really affect anything as far as the final product for the fans. According to Carl Urban, this is supposed to be more of a dedicated, it's more dedicated to the comic books than the Sylvester Stallone one was. So I'm really curious to see what they're going to do with this. I'm pretty sure they're going to show a lot of footage over at Comic-Con, probably at WonderCon as well, because so far we haven't really seen anything from this film. Not a teaser, not really a poster. I think maybe 1 or 2 stills have come out.
Yeah, it's pretty much just stills. And, I am intrigued by Dredd. And I'll tell you why. It's because Judge Dredd really is one of the more fascinating, I think, characters and a fascinating world that he lives in, because you're talking about a guy who is a cop and a judge. And he has the right to investigate, charge, and execute people in the street on the spot. And that makes him a fascinating character. Now, the Sylvester Stallone version, well, I think I like that movie more than most people did, but let's be honest, it wasn't really true to it, and they promised that this one will be a return to a true spirit of Judge Dredd. Director Peter Travis, who also directed Vantage Point, which I thought was a pretty fascinating film. They went out and they got Carl Urban, who I love. I think Carl Urban's amazing. So I'm looking forward to Dredd, but I'm going to tell you right now, George, Dredd is not my number 1 film pick for the superheroes this movie. Is it yours?
It is not, John.
All right, then let's move on. Let's for now move on to the next potential candidate here. And we're going to talk a little bit about another sort of reboot. They're calling it a requel, Ghost Rider 2 Spirit of Vengeance. Mm-hmm. Now, you and I both know the writers and directors of this, right. Brian Taylor and Mark Neveldine, and they've said, well, it's kind of a reboot, but it's also kind of a sequel. We're calling it a requel, which is kind of interesting. Yeah. For me, this is another one of those, characters, another one of those comic books that has tons of potential to be really great on screen. And I had a lot of hope for the first Ghost Rider. Clearly, the first Ghost Rider was rather disappointing. I think most people felt that way. Even those who liked it thought it was a little bit disappointing. And I think in the hands of Neveldine and Taylor, the guys who brought us Crank, I think it has the potential to be much better than the original. What are your thoughts on it?
No, I do too, and I'm a big fan of Neveldine and Taylor. I like the Crank movies, so I'm really curious to see what they're going to do with a dark character like Ghost Rider. And that was the problem with the first one, was they kind of made him a little campy. I mean, the Ghost Rider sequences looked cool, but overall, it just the tone of the film wasn't very dark, and I think that they're going to go that way with the second one. And just from what I've seen from the trailers and from the posters, it looks awesome. So I'm really, it's not my number 1 of the year, but I am really, really looking forward to seeing Spirit of Vengeance.
I am also with you. It is also not my number 1 pick, but again, I'm looking forward to it. Okay, let's move on to another one here. Also in the vein of reboots, also in the vein of sequels, we're going to be talking now about Spider-Man,
right?
Or the Amazing Spider-Man, as the case may be. This is an interesting one, because this is one where a lot of people were like, you know what, a lot of people didn't want there to be a reboot. A lot of people didn't want there to be another one. They wanted Spider-Man 4. They wanted, pardon me, Sam Raimi to do his fourth Spider-Man with Tobey Maguire and Kirsten Dunst. And they wanted that. But I am one of the few guys who, while maybe I might think it's still a little bit early for a reboot of the franchise, I thought Sam Raimi, and I've said this before publicly, Sam Raimi is a creative filmmaker. And when you put a creative filmmaker in one franchise for too long, I think their creativity suffers. And I think we saw Sam Raimi get creatively fatigued in it. And I think, especially with Spider-Man 3, which was such a drop, and you saw a lot of repetitive things, I think it was good for Raimi to move on from Spider-Man. I think it was good for them to end the series where it was and to reboot it. I may not have rebooted it right now, but I'll tell you this. I love Andrew Garfield, the guy who's playing Peter Parker now. Yeah. I thought he was the absolute heart and soul of the Social Network. I thought, not only do I think he should have been nominated for Best Supporting Actor, I thought he should have won Best Supporting Actor at the Oscars last year. I'm a huge fan of his, so I'm a big fan of the casting. I'm a big fan of Emma Stone, so I really like the idea of her being cast in the film as well. Mark Webb, I've only ever seen 500 Days of Summer, so that's the only background I have on him. I enjoyed that film very much. How that'll translate into like a comic book action film, I'm not really clear on that yet. So call me optimistic. I am optimistic about The Amazing Spider-Man. What are your thoughts?
I'm optimistic too. I don't mind them doing a reboot. What I do mind is them spending the first half of the film talking about his origin and setting up characters. These are characters that we already know. Even kids now have already seen the previous Spider-Man film, so they know how he got his powers. If you can do a thing like they did in the credits of the Hulk, where they pretty much kind of explain what happens during the opening credits.
That was genius. That was absolutely genius how they completely went over the origin story again in like 30 seconds. That was brilliant.
Yeah, I mean, the kid gets bitten by a spider. I don't need an hour of story for that. I don't need a lot of setup between him and Aunt May and him and Mary Jane Watson and Gwen Stacy. I don't need that huge setup. I mean, yes, I do want them to to have the character interaction and have that the story is also the most important thing. But I do want to get into the action. I don't want to see an hour of him going, oh, what's this? I can crawl on a wall.
Yeah, we've been there. We've done that not long ago. It wasn't all that long ago. We've already covered all this. Can we please move forward? I really hope you're right. I hope you're right. I wasn't thrilled with the first trailer, but like I said, mark me down as optimistic, but still, Spider-Man is not my number one. Yours?
Not my number one either, John.
All right, well, let's move on from this a little bit then and talk about the next big one. This one's major. The Avengers.
Yeah.
And of course, everybody has been buzzing about the Avengers ever since the end of the first Iron Man film. When the credits are rolling, Tony Stark walks back into his office and Samuel L. Jackson comes out as Nick Fury and mentions the Avengers project. Everybody's been talking about it. Every Marvel film has been setting up for this. Very interesting choice to bring on Joss Whedon. I think that has a lot of people excited, but a little cautious at the same time. Some people really thought they should have brought on one of the directors from any of the Marvel films for a sense of continuity. I like the idea of Joss Whedon. I think he's great at dialogue. It'll be interesting to see how he does with action, but I love Serenity, the movie.
Yeah.
So he can do sci-fi action, clearly. Obviously, the cast is great. I've loved all these Marvel films. I love the Hulk. I love Thor. I loved Captain America. I love Iron Man. So the mixture is there, but it's cautious optimism I have because there's also a lot of potential for this thing falling apart. I think it's going to be great, but I'm a little bit nervous. Your thoughts?
I actually think this is going to be fantastic. I'm really, really looking forward to the Avengers because, and I've been speculating about this since I did the set visit for Iron Man 2. Is the name the Skrulls going to be used? Because I don't even think that they have the license to use Skrulls. I think that's actually a Fox license. So interesting. Yeah. So though I'm not sure if the word Skrulls is going to actually be used, although I'm pretty sure that's who they're going to be facing. There was always a debate that the Hulk was the villain in the first part of the film, and that the Avengers have to go and calm this guy down because if you remember at the end of the Edward Norton Hulk. he's able to control when he can change into the Hulk. So I think they go after him in the beginning, and then the Hulk joins the team later, because you don't see a lot of Hulk in these trailers at all. It's just like one sound bite from Bruce Banner. And
yeah, well, to be fair to them on that, I mean, the Hulk is also, I mean, he's probably going to be the last thing that's done, because he's the singular all CGI character. So he's probably the last thing to be finished in this thing.
Yeah, so I'm really curious to see. I'm not worried about Joss Whedon as a director. I think he's going to be fine. I think the dialogue's going to be fantastic. The actor's going to be great. They're already into these roles. That they know how to play them. Tom Hiddleston as Loki is just
awesome.
Steals every scene he's in.
Awesome.
So, this actually is my number one superhero movie of the year that I'm looking forward to seeing. So.
There it is. The number one for George Roush is the Avengers, and I just gave away mine because I might as well jump into mine now. My absolute number one, and I shouldn't say absolute as if there's a huge gap between 1 and 2. The Avengers for me is my second most anticipated superhero film of the year, but it is really difficult for me to say anything other than The Dark Knight Rises. For this, I've loved the first 2 Batman films. I listed actually The Dark Knight Rises as my second most anticipated film of the year overall, not just out of superhero movies, just behind The Hobbit. And it's The Dark Knight Rises for me. In Christopher Nolan, I trust. I have yet to see him mess anything up. I was one of the few guys that was already a Christopher Nolan fan before he did the first Batman film. I mean, everybody knows Memento, but he also did, I think, a tragically underrated film with Robin Williams and Al Pacino. I keep on wanting to say Al Pacino ever since Tropic Thunder, but Al Pacino, called Insomnia, that I thought is drastically underrated. I thought it was a brilliant, brilliant film. I've been a huge fan of Christopher Nolan for a while. He's done a spectacular job with all these things. So for me, The Dark Knight Rises is my number one. But I'm curious, George, let me just ask you quickly. I know you're looking forward to The Dark Knight Rises, but what is it to you that has it just a little bit below the Avengers for you?
I don't know. I mean, I've already seen 2 Batman movies, and I'm looking forward to it, but I know he's going to be closing it out with Bane, and the trailer didn't get me as hyped as I thought it would, unlike the Avengers trailer. So, I'm very excited for it, but for some odd reason, it's just not my number one film of the year. I'm a huge Nolan fan. The Prestige is still my favorite film of his, but
interesting.
Yeah, I love that film. But, I mean, it's just the whole thing with Bane and with Batman. I'm really curious to see how he's going to close his trilogy out. If it's going to go the way of the Nightfall comic book series, or if he's going to go in a completely different direction. I don't know. So I'm very curious. It's going to make a ton of money. So
absolutely it is. Well, listen, folks, now it's time for you to chime in, because now AMC asks, what is your most anticipated superhero film of 2012? Which one of these 5? The Avengers, The Dark Knight Rises, Ghost Rider, Spirit of Vengeance, Dredd, or The Amazing Spider-Man? Which ones of these films do you think is going to be the best one of the bunch in 2012? Now, I'm going to tell you right now how you can let us know, pardon me as I cough, let us know which one you think is going to be the best. Simply hop on Twitter. Make sure you follow us at AMC Movie News. If you're not following us, then we can't direct message you back to let you know you won. So make sure you're following us at AMC Movie News and tweet to us which superhero film of 2012 you think is going to be the best. So simply tweet to us at AMC Movie News. Tell us which superhero film of 2012 you think is going to be the best. And don't forget to include the hashtag AMC Asks. So go ahead and do that. Thank you for following us. And also, folks, don't forget, follow us on Facebook at facebook.com/AMC Theaters. Follow us on Twitter, of course, at AMC Movie News. And don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. I want to thank George Roush for joining me for this little segment. Thank you, folks, for joining us. And until we do our next AMC Asks, bye-bye.